Minister.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker. I rise today to try and shed some light on the government's absolute disaster that it's brought upon itself in our healthcare system in Australia. We had commitments from Mr Abbott when he was in opposition that there be no changes to health and no cuts to Medicare. We've had commitments just recently that the Prime Minister is listening. We've had an acknowledgement by the Prime Minister that his government since September 2013 has been bad. But what we've seen on Medicare and the treatment of patients, all Australians, and medical doctors, GPs, in this place is a disgrace. And not only is it disgraceful, it's nothing short of an absolute disaster. We've seen this absolutely no consultation from the government when it just suddenly announced a new tax, a government of no surprises, a government of no new taxes, suddenly announces a tax on every single Australian when they visit the doctor. Then we saw a backflip on that. And then 2 days before Christmas, we saw a direct attack on GPs themselves, and again, without any consultation. And then we saw the minister get dumped, a new minister put in place, hauled off a cruise. I don't quite know whether she was actually on the ship and had to be helicoptered off, but the PM was so afraid of what had happened, he couldn't front the Australian community himself. He pulled his Minister for Health off the ship that she was boarding for her holiday to stand before the Australian people and admit that they'd made a mistake. And that really has been the beginning of the end for the Abbott government. They have gone too far. Australians have absolutely had enough. But what's happening now? Well, in this place yesterday, we heard the Assistant Health Minister tell us she was listening. Well, I'm sure, Madam Acting Deputy President, that you, like me and like the Abbott government, have had hundreds of emails from GPs. And I know in my state of Western Australia that every email a Western Australia senator, an Abbott government senator, has received has been sent to me. So I know that they have received exactly the same concerns from general practitioners that I've received. And I can assure the Senate today that I've responded to every single one of those GPs, letting them know that Labor is with them, that we absolutely oppose what the Abbott government is trying to do to our health system. I doubt they've had the same assurances from the Abbott government. And so it does seem a little strange that Minister Ley and indeed the Assistant Minister have pledged to listen. They just need to ask their backbenchers and their ministers to give them copies of those letters they've received from GPs, because I've received exactly the same ones because I've been CC'd into them. And it seems to me that the rot has well and truly started in the Abbott government in relation to the mess it's made or it wants to make of our health system. And indeed, one of its own, Mr Laming, a former GP, has come out and criticised his own government. His own government. Mr Laming came out and bravely criticised what the Abbott government was seeking to do to Medicare through its ridiculous GP tax, through its ridiculous attempt to reduce the Medicare rebate for doctors. And Mr Laming has said, actually, what the Abbott government should be doing is rewarding high-performing doctors rather than punishing them. Those were his words. So he saw the Abbott government, of which he's a member of, was punishing doctors. And it seems to me that it doesn't matter what sort of worker you are in this country, you're in the sights of the Abbott government. Whether you're a GP, and certainly GPs told me in the same emails they sent to the Abbott government that surgeries would close, obviously had no effect. So whether you're a GP, whether you're a shipbuilder, whether you're a cleaner here at Parliament House, whether you're an aged care worker, whether you're an early child educator, whether you're a person who works penalty rates or someone who exists on the minimum wage. The Abbott government is determined to either reduce your wage or put you out of business altogether, such as those GPs who told me and told the Abbott government that their surgeries would close. And let me give the Senate a flavour of some of the emails that I've received, the same emails that have been sent to the Abbott government. And I was really very impressed that many of the GPs who wrote to me were GPs who'd been GPs for more than 25 years. Imagine, never taken political action before. After 25, 30, 35 years, absolutely got really angry at what was being suggested and started writing to all of the political parties because they know the Abbott government is a bad government, despite what its current leader says. So this one, and I quote, "I'm very concerned that the co-payment is being considered by this government. As a GP with over 30 years medical experience, I already see the difficulties my elderly, chronically ill and disadvantaged patients face. To add an additional impost affecting their GP visits and any additional pathology or imaging requirements is both unfair, unjust and untenable. My patients are already worried about what will happen. Chasing bad debts, which is what the co-payment will amount to, will harm general practice as well." End quote. Together with all other GPs in Australia, quite contrary to what we heard from Senator Nash yesterday, I was never consulted about a co-payment. It has been disastrously introduced, never seriously considered, clearly another botched government initiative. That's from another GP, and the West Australian Abbott government senators opposite have got that email. And another one. Is the electorate being taken seriously by this one-term government? Patients and doctors are offended by such a combination of arrogance and ignorance. And yet another one sent to Abbott government MPs. It appears the government really has not much idea of what happens at a GP level. And the last one, and there were quite a number of these, after a lifetime of voting for the Liberal Party, I will never trust them with my vote again. And hence we get back to that mistrust. Hence we get back to this mistrust. Senator. And as I've been at pains to point out, these were emails sent to the Abbott government and I was CC'd into them. Now, I'm not sure if this threat about not voting Liberal has kind of seized their attention, or whether it was a threat that Labor would disallow their harsh, cruel measures that they intended to pursue in Medicare in this place, that suddenly, 2 days before Christmas, we're listening. Well, they should have been listening when they received all of those hundreds of GP emails. Something has got to be a little wrong when you suddenly get hundreds of GP emails. And what impressed me about those emails from rural and regional GPs, from GPs in a single practice to GPs in large practices and medium practices, from GPs working with Aboriginal groups to GPs who service the aged care, is that patient care was paramount. They put their own interests before they put their patients first. Their patients came first, and that's what impressed me about all of these emails. And they weren't the standard all the same, and I'm sure if the Abbott government wants to be truthful about the numbers of emails it's received from GPs, they would say that too. They weren't carbon copies. They were GPs telling their own story. And what's happened? It's fallen on deaf ears, because I haven't heard one Abbott government member, except Mr Laming, who's been brave enough to actually admit that what the government wants to do on Medicare is wrong. And indeed, Sussan Ley, in her own words, has said, we're listening. Well, when? When are they listening? Because they've got hundreds of emails already that they could be reading and listening to. But she's still intent on changes. So you can't listen on the one hand and then say on the other, but we're going to go ahead with these changes. What's she going to say? Oh, yeah, we consulted, but however, we're still doing this. A GP tax will not be tolerated by the Australian community, and a new election to get rid of this government can't come soon enough. And it doesn't matter who the leader is, whether it's Mr Turnbull, whether Mr Hockey gets dumped as the Treasurer. They have bad policies, and they've demonstrated over and over again that they're incapable of listening. They don't want to change. They've got a right-wing ideology. Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President.